Marcus Chen pressed his forehead against the cold window of his penthouse, watching the city below transform into a wonderland of twinkling lights and holiday cheer. At 62, he had everything the world told him to want: a fortune that could buy small countries, a name that commanded respect in boardrooms across continents, and a view that most people only saw in magazines. Yet as Christmas Eve descended upon the city once again, the silence in his luxury apartment felt suffocating, wrapping around him like a heavy blanket he couldn't shake off. This wasn't new. For 15 years, Marcus had spent every Christmas exactly like this, alone with his thoughts, his regrets, and a bottle of expensive scotch that never quite numbed the ache in his chest. The staff had long ago stopped asking if he needed anything for the holidays. They knew better. They knew about the accident that took his wife and son on a snowy Christmas morning 15 years ago, how he'd thrown himself into work ever since, building an empire as a monument to his grief. What they didn't know was that every year, on this night, Marcus made himself sit by that window and remember everything he'd lost, as though punishing himself was the only way to keep their memory alive. The knock on the door startled him so badly that he nearly dropped his glass. Marcus stood frozen, confused. No one came to his private residence unannounced. The building had security tighter than Fort Knox. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. But curiosity, or perhaps the desperate hope for any interruption to his melancholy, pulled him toward the door. He opened it to find a woman in her early 30s, her coat thin and worn, snowflakes melting in her dark hair. Beside her stood a girl of about 7, clutching a battered shoebox, decorated with crayon, drawings of stars and candy canes. Both of them were shivering, their cheeks red from the cold. "I'm so sorry to bother you," the woman began, her voice trembling, though whether from cold or nerves Marcus couldn't tell. "I know this is incredibly strange, but we've been ringing doorbells for the past hour and no one will help us. Our car broke down 6 blocks from here and my phone's dead. I just need to call a tow truck and maybe wait somewhere warm until help arrives. I saw your light on and thought—" She stopped, seeming to realize how desperate she sounded. "I'm sorry. This was a mistake." She turned to leave, gently tugging her daughter's hand. But Marcus found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Wait!" The word came out rougher than he intended. "Come inside. You'll freeze out there." The woman hesitated, studying his face with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned to be cautious. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her because she nodded slowly. "Thank you. I'm Sarah and this is my daughter Emma." As they stepped into the warmth of his apartment, Marcus watched Emma's eyes grow wide, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the Christmas tree that his housekeeper had insisted on setting up, despite knowing he'd never look at it. It was still undecorated, standing bare and somewhat pathetic in the corner. "You can use the phone in the kitchen," Marcus said, gesturing down the hallway. "I'll make some hot chocolate for your daughter." Sarah looked surprised but grateful. While she made her calls, Marcus found himself in the kitchen with Emma, who had placed her shoebox carefully on the counter and was watching him with those large, thoughtful eyes that children have before the world teaches them to look away. "What's in the box?" Marcus asked, more to fill the silence than out of genuine interest. Emma's face lit up. "Cookies! Mommy and I made them yesterday. We were taking them to the shelter downtown. You know, where people don't have homes. Mommy says Christmas is about sharing what you have, even when you don't have much." She paused, then added solemnly, "We don't have much, but we have each other, and Mommy says that's the most important thing." Something cracked in Marcus's chest, a fissure in the wall he'd spent 15 years building. He turned away quickly, busying himself with the hot chocolate, not wanting this child to see the sudden moisture in his eyes. Sarah returned, her expression tight with worry. "The tow truck can't come until tomorrow morning because of the snow. I called a taxi, but they're saying at least 2 hours because everyone needs rides tonight. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. We'll just wait in the lobby downstairs." "Don't be ridiculous," Marcus heard himself say. "You'll stay here until the taxi comes. Have you eaten dinner?" The way Emma's face brightened and Sarah's eyes filled with grateful. Tears told him everything he needed to know. As he heated up the gourmet meal his chef had left in the refrigerator, food he'd planned to ignore, as usual, Marcus felt something stirring in him that he hadn't felt in years. The apartment didn't feel quite so empty anymore. Over dinner, Sarah told their story. She'd been laid off from her nursing job 3 months ago when the hospital downsized. She'd been doing odd jobs while searching for something permanent, determined to keep their small apartment and give Emma some stability. Tonight, they'd been delivering cookies they'd baked with their last groceries before. Sarah started a new job after the holidays. "Why the shelter?" Marcus asked. "Why not just save the cookies for yourselves?" Sarah smiled a little sadly. "Because I grew up in shelters like that. I know what it feels like to think the world's forgotten you. And I want Emma to understand that no matter how hard things get, we're never too poor to help someone else." After dinner, Emma noticed the bare Christmas tree. "How come you didn't decorate it?" she asked with the blunt honesty of children. Marcus found he couldn't answer. How could he explain to this child that he'd left it, bare as another form of self-punishment? A reminder that he didn't deserve joy? But Emma had already opened her shoebox and was pulling out ornaments, handmade decorations crafted from construction paper, popsicle sticks, and lots of glitter. "We made extras," she announced. "Can we decorate your tree, please?" Sarah started to protest, but Marcus surprised them both. "I'd like that." As they hung those humble ornaments on branches that had known only expensive designer decorations in years past, something inside Marcus began to thaw. Emma chattered about school, about her favorite Christmas movie, about how she wanted to be a doctor like her mom when she grew up. Sarah added ornaments more quietly, occasionally catching Marcus's eye with a smile that acknowledged how strange and wonderful this evening had become. When Emma asked about the framed photo on the mantel, the one of Marcus with his wife and son, taken months before the accident, he found himself telling them the story. Not the sanitized version he gave reporters, but the real one, with all its pain and guilt. How he'd been working late on Christmas Eve 15 years ago, how he'd promised to be home early but broke that promise. How his wife had decided to drive their son to look at Christmas lights without him, and how a drunk driver had taken them both. "I've spent every Christmas since then alone," Marcus admitted, his voice breaking. "I thought I deserved to be alone. I thought the pain was what I owed them." Emma, with the wisdom that sometimes comes from the mouths of babes, walked over and took his hand. "I bet they wouldn't want you to be sad. When my daddy left us, Mommy cried a lot. But she told me that loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even when you're not together anymore." Sarah's eyes were shining with tears. "Emma's right. I'm sure your family wouldn't want this for you, Marcus. Love isn't meant to be a prison." The taxi called an hour later, but Marcus found himself offering them his guest room instead. "It's still snowing," he reasoned. "And tomorrow's Christmas. Let me give you a ride home in the morning." What he didn't say was that he couldn't bear the thought of being alone again, not yet, not after feeling alive for the first time in 15 years. Sarah accepted and Emma fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from their adventure. As Marcus covered her with a blanket, Sarah touched his arm gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "You probably think you helped us tonight, but I think maybe we needed to be here just as much as you needed us to knock on your door." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Marcus woke early, and for the first time in 15 years, he didn't feel that crushing weight on his chest. He made breakfast, a real breakfast, not the protein shake he usually grabbed, and when Emma and Sarah emerged, sleepy and grateful, they ate together like a family. When Marcus drove them home later, he saw their small apartment building, the modest neighborhood where hope persisted despite hardship. As he helped carry Emma inside, an idea took root in his mind. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a call. The hospital that had laid her off was hiring again, and they wanted her back with a promotion and a raise. She couldn't understand it until the letter arrived, explaining that a large, anonymous donation had been made to the hospital's expansion fund, with the stipulation that she be the first person rehired. But Marcus's involvement didn't end there. Emma's school received funding for new equipment and after-school programs. The shelter where Sarah and Emma had been taking cookies found itself, suddenly able to afford expansions and better services. Marcus discovered that giving, really giving, not just writing tax-deductible checks, filled the hole in his heart better than grief ever had. Every Sunday, Marcus had dinner with Sarah and Emma. He became Uncle Marcus, the man who showed up at school plays and helped with homework and remembered that Emma liked her hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Slowly, he stopped seeing them as a replacement for what he'd lost and started seeing them as something new and precious in their own right. On the next Christmas Eve, Marcus didn't wait alone by his window. Instead, his apartment was filled with laughter and love. Sarah and Emma were there, along with friends they'd introduced him to, people from the shelter, co-workers who'd become family. The tree sparkled with expensive ornaments now. But pride of place went to Emma's handmade decorations from that first night. A little girl's gift that had saved a man's soul. As Marcus watched Emma place the star on top of the tree, Sarah beside him, he finally understood what his wife would have wanted him to know all along. Love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, finding new ways to bloom. If only we're brave enough to open the door when it knocks, even on the loneliest night of the year. That evening, as snow began to fall outside, Marcus raised his glass in a quiet toast to the family he'd lost and the family he'd found. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest gifts come in the most unexpected packages, delivered by a shivering single, mom and her daughter with a shoebox full of cookies and hearts, big enough to save a lonely man from himself.